for Tuesday, September 6th. Oh, there it was right in front of me, just in a different hand. So we have a second letter for us to consider. This one was provided to us by Stephen Roberts, our Director of Land Use and Transportation, a letter to the Oregon Traffic Commission on a letter on Goal 6 tolling and congestion pricing. And if, yes, there I have my copy. So would you like to come up to the table and just give us a brief rundown and see if we have any board questions and go from there? This, commissioners, was sent to us by Stephen on Friday afternoon at 4:09, in case you're looking for it in your email.
Yes, and Clerk Moss added it to the board packets. Thank you for that. I'm actually going to ask Chris to give a run through. She's the author and is a little bit more adept at explaining this than I am. So.
Okay. All right. Well, just as a thank you, Chair and Commissioners, just as a starting point, the Oregon Highway Plan is being updated. There's an existing Goal 6, which is their policies, and this one relates to tolling and congestion pricing. This policy will apply, or does apply statewide. So even though we are in the up to here in tolling in our region, this is really intended to go statewide. So we have to think about applications statewide, not just locally. And so this letter highlights we included the I guess 14 pages, 13 pages of their description in the policy, and your letter highlights a few of the key points that have come up in various conversations that that there's pretty general consensus that need to be addressed. There may be some differences ahead of us in terms of how they're addressed. And ODOT and staff has indicated a willingness to continue to work on this. In fact, there will be a new revised version of this just before the OTC considers it on the 15th. So they're working on that now. And you, all of you really are engaged in tolling one place or another, whether it's Northwest Acts discussion or R1 Acts discussion or the Toll Advisory Committee's discussion or MPAC or JPAC, everyone's talking about it. And so this is an opportunity for you to share your thoughts with each other and see where you are in agreement on. And by the way, of course, ask questions. So what this letter highlights is some of the, like, I think there's 5 of the key points that have risen to the top without going into the details about exactly, I didn't count up how many action items or statements there are within this 13-page. So the first one is the definition of a corridor for which mitigation would be applied. And the Oregon Highway Plan Amendment identifies corridor fairly narrowly as within a mile and all roads going the same direction. And I think we know here that within Washington County, we certainly see when 26 is congested, for example, even without tolling, we see travel going across the hills to US 30 or down Highway 10 and through the rural roads, Clark Hill and all to the south. So we know that diversion doesn't follow a neat line within a mile of a corridor. So this first point is asking to have a broader definition of a corridor, recognize that the needs are going to vary by the types of projects where diversion occurs. So that's the first point. The second point is a request to really carefully mitigate the health and safety impacts of diversion. We know, and we've seen this as well, when a congested corridor, cars can run chock-a-block on an arterial, creating additional safety concerns and health concerns. And in particular, the original draft of this proposal says that only trips that are less than 3 miles shouldn't be considered diversion because they shouldn't be on the interstates anyway. And while that's a nice goal to have the interstates preserved for longer distance trips and freight movement in particular, it isn't what's happening. We do have ons and offs on the system. And they are going to have, if they're displaced from the interstate system, they are going to have an impact. So this is just to call out that that diversion needs to be addressed, not just trips over 3 miles. The third one is we're going to have, I can tell you, we're going to have a lot more discussions about this one, the use of revenue, because there's going to be a lot of opinions about this. But the important point here is that you'll remember that, and the very first statement says that the tolling was identified to both raise revenue and manage demand. And we're keeping both of those front and center as we think about this. It's not just managing demand and keeping people from using the road, but it's also to raise revenue to make improvements on the road that are needed. And we've talked before about how we're short of money for making these major investments that are going to be needed. So this one is strengthen the commitment to, in particular, for those facilities that are told, provide an option so that there isn't diversion, provide an option such as particularly the use of transit, and make transit options so that people have an option besides tolling. They need to have an option. So this asks to strengthen the commitment to investing in options, multimodal investments that can be used instead of driving. The next one is one that we've talked about quite a bit before. I think one of the last letters you wrote was around the I-205 toll project, when that project was being moved into the regional transportation plan. And there was a commitment in the final language that got approved through JPAC and talked about an MPAC, and as well as the Metro Council, to be sure to engage local and regional communities throughout the process, both in defining the process up front, in developing it, and importantly as well, ongoing implementation. Because one thing's sure, we're probably not going to get it right. There's going to be changes, going to be things that pop up that we're going to need to know as the program gets implemented. So this version doesn't have the strength of the commitment to local and regional participation in the process that it had been already committed to in the agreements to move forward earlier. I think, okay, there's one more. And this one is one I've heard before, is about the importance of cost and being able to identify a cost and benefit, being really articulate about what the costs are and what the benefits are. Now I have to say, we don't know what the costs are yet. ODOT will be establishing, OTC will be establishing a rate setting committee later this year, soon. And that committee, it'll be like a rules advisory committee that's required to set up toll rates. But it is important for the public to better understand what the costs and the benefits are of the toll program, and be articulate about that. So that's a call out for that in the future. The other sections in here is to reiterate your commitment previously about centering equity in this work. And you've heard from us before, and Amanda Garcia-Snell has been on the Equity Mobility Advisory Committee and all the work that they've done that the Oregon Transportation is considering. And then the other thing is that the point is again, the toll rate setting has not been set yet. The committee has not been established, but there is a report on options and for needing to set exemptions for those 200% of the poverty line. That's kind of a standard like TriMet's low income fare program. But also there's a recognition that it's a flexible line. People move up and down it. So to be able to have some level exceptions for low wage jobs that need to get to work and also need some sort of consideration. Lastly, the last point is that just to reiterate that we have the county has a local system, an arterial system, and the state system, and they're intertwined. And we need to continue to think of those as a transportation system together and work in partnership as we move forward on this to create a successful and finally a commitment, because I think you're all going to be here for a while. This is going to go on for a long time to continue to be engaged to make this a success. So it probably could be create instead of support. We realized so create a successful program. So that's only the high points. There's a lot of details you could have picked. We all could have picked out. These are the main messages, and the discussion is going to continue. So it's a starting point to see where you are in alignment, what other things you might like to include.
So first, for our main representatives on the multiple committees. I'm looking at least three of you that are dealing with transportation and tolling, because I know we've got MPAC, we've got JPAC, we've got the Regional Tolling Advisory Committee, we've got the Region 1 Act. Are there any points in this draft letter currently that you feel need to change?
I can start and say, I think I've been in conversation with Chris for a long time about all this stuff. So I don't have the letter. It's good as it is for me. And thank you, Chris, for working so hard. This has been a lots of conversations that you had to endure and participate and then putting your head on this paper, really condensing that 13 pages to really the key points. And then what this letter does is really puts us as a board on the same page as the conversation evolves and turns into something that we may not expect. And it might not go the direction it's going now. It might go somewhere else. But then we can always come back to this letter and say, well, this is where we were. Do we need to have a conversation to change where we stand on these 4 points? So thank you, Chris. And I'm happy to say it's good to go and to send it off to the intended audience for this.
Commissioner Treese and Commissioner Rogers, thoughts?
Well, first of all, again, thank you. This is really good, and it really does condense what I believe our collective thoughts are. The other piece where I think this is going to be helpful is with AOC and on the Transportation Committee, since this is an Oregon approach, not just, we're not talking regionally, since that's usually we're usually talking regionally. And so I do think that it gives us something to discuss at AOC as well. I'm not on the Transportation Committee, but I do think it's helpful there. So thank you.
Commissioner Rogers, how about you?
My comments would be this. First of all, I'd say, Chris, it's much easier to criticize than a draft. And I've always known that. I've had clients who've done that. I draft what I think is pretty good, and then they want to pick at it. So I understand. There's some really good parts and some parts that I would hope that we might maybe bolster a little bit. And my eye is not on 205. My eye is not necessarily just on I-5. It's on 217, 26, because this is statewide.
Yep.
This is just the beginning.
Mhm.
And so I think the term of art is not just congestion pricing. I think it's variable congestion pricing. ODOT's using variable in all of their terms because it can vary based upon time of day, traffic and all that. So I like their term of art a lot better than what we just said here, because I think it's an important distinction. So I would encourage us to take a look at that. And about the third paragraph down, to raise revenue, I guess I'm going to be a little bit myopic on this, but I believe we ought to say for multimodal projects, just not to raise the money. I think it's got to go to multi, and that's pretty much what everybody's agreed to anyway. But I like the specificity of that. I frankly get a little lost in the mile and 3 miles. Probably everybody else has it, but is that from the middle of the project area? Is it from the beginning of the project area? And why that's important, at least in the district that I represent, let's pick on 205. Most of Tualatin is going to be impacted hugely, especially with I-5 if you do that one, from everywhere from the Boones Bridge to the Columbia Crossing. Most of that is outside the mile or the 3 mile radius in Tualatin. And so how would they take all this diversion and get any revenue? So I don't have any. I wish I had more suggestions than I just did, where I was saying put variable, put for multimodal, but I think that we need to say something to clean that up a little bit so that, unfortunately, when I was on JPAC, I was always pushing what we did here, that we have a county-wide transportation system. I thought we ought to have a region-wide. And the region system is anything that I used to quip and say it's anything people can't pay for. So if I can't pay for it, it becomes part of the region because everybody else needs to pay for my project. So if we had a regional, it wouldn't be so problematic. But if we were some way able to say that we have this collective system and we ought to put it on this collective system versus somebody saying, well, I'm within a mile, but my neighborhood street's taking a little traffic. And so put a lot of, I don't know how to get at that, but I would like it to do that. Also, as you know, one of the wars in the future will be tolling normally goes for specific projects. I mean, back east or anywhere we see tolling, it's like building a bridge, doing a extra capacity line, whatever it is. Here, we're raising revenue for capacity only, not necessarily project related. I think ODOT's position, if I understand it correctly, is that they have a term of, and this is important, obviously, district for the folks on the Northwest Act, too, because you're going to have projects. It would sunset once the project is done, but others are saying with congestion pricing, the revenue will go on for a long time. So what happens to that revenue? And you say, well, we're just dealing today. We're not dealing with 20 years. But if we put our stake in the ground, then future boards can say, we asked the question, what's going to happen? And to me, that revenue, again, if you go back to some kind of a region-wide system, multimodal, that makes sense. But if the revenue runs out for ODOT, but the congestion pricing still goes, is that only going to that mile or 3 mile affected area? Or will it go to a much broader application? And maybe that's what you're saying in here, but it's not real clear to me that that's what's going on. So there's parts in here, if you saw my little draft, I'd say, I agree, it's good, you know, but there's some little nuances I think might be important for the future.
So variable isn't the term that they've used. They've used congestion pricing.
I can go out in the car and grab you their literature that they're sending out.
Well, this policy refers to congestion pricing, so I think we need to stick with referencing the language that they have if there's something about
OHP.
in the OHP, yeah.
Not necessarily the ODOT publication.
Correct, yeah, this is
It's on the
in the Oregon Highway Plan Amendment. So I'm trying to think, I mean, I think they are considering, ODOT is considering variable pricing of charging different amounts at different times a day. And that's something they're going to figure out as they do the environmental analysis to figure
Right.
that out. They got a lot more work to do. So it is going to, the intent is
appreciate
for it
that,
to vary,
Appreciate that.
but they haven't gone into that level of detail here because we're gonna have a lot more discussions about this because there's a whole environmental process starting for all the I-5205 piece.
So
I would-
that's one point of clarification I'd like to make. We're talking today about the Oregon Highway Plan and trying to ensure that we are providing comments and participating as one jurisdiction on this umbrella plan document as they continue to move forward in the evolution on multiple fronts. And this is where I'm reminding myself of the axiom, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Because even with the transportation planning rule, which is another example of the intersection of transportation
Right.
and land use, we've seen how getting to that first adopted version was a lot of hard work and pretty arduous, but it has been amended and improved upon. And I think everyone is trying to do their best to put together a solid enough policy document so that we can then move forward on the multiple fronts and come back and make the revisions. And so that's where I look for the three of you, for the major committees that have to review this at this juncture, to ask, is there anything about the way this is worded such that it would compromise the county's ability to continue to work in partnership? It's one of the lenses that I wanted to bring to today's table, because it's not necessarily everything we could possibly comment on, right? Or the absolute end game. But at this juncture, does it make statements to at least indicate that these are the areas where we think revisions would have appreciable benefit.
I appreciate that nuance. That's important, what you just said. Does it, Chris, in your mind, because you drafted this, there are issues that are going to come up. I was talking about variable and it was pointed out, and I certainly can accept that. That's a good answer. That maybe the transportation rule is different than what is really happening in the discussion. As we get into other issues, particularly the safety issues and the corridor issues, the mile and the 3 mile, those are really important issues. Is there anything that we need to say about variable, about use of revenue, future use of revenue, future distributions, so that we have an opportunity to access that again, should it come back? Or would they say, well, you wrote a letter, you said you support everything. And we said, but that was before we saw you going in a lot of different directions. Is there anything, and if not, if you're saying that this covers it, then I guess I'm okay. I'm just concerned about how the revenue will be raised, where it'll be spent. I think it ought to be multi. I think it ought to be on the network, not just on somebody's projects in a particular geographic area.
Well, I think I would say you've nailed it. I think there's going to be a lot more concern about who gets to decide where the revenue is spent and what projects will it be spent on. And that was one of the areas that you highlighted to strengthen. And that certainly is something we could, I mean, this language says strengthen commitment to multimodal investments and use of revenue. It could say commit to, using the revenue for multimodal projects. That still begs a question about who decides which projects are needed and where. I mean, there's
no
gonna be
way
a
we'll
lot
get
more.
that level of clarity now, though.
Yeah,
So
so this is just that it's a flag that if people are going to be asked to pay tolls, they need to be provided an option.
And we could probably include in this letter the option for continued dialogue, and something to that effect. So the other question that I have, and where I'm stepping in front of you here.
Oh, you're not at all. I think that's you and Catherine are both getting to the heart of my questions. How do you continue to participate? Because this thing's evolving over the next year and a half. Or will they just accept this letter and say, you guys, you weighed in, that was at the beginning, you don't have another chance. So I wanted to be able to stake and say, we need to come back in if we have to. Oh, I'm sorry, Danny, go ahead.
Part of that was the intent of the fourth comment was we want to continue to be engaged along with all of our partners around the region in these discussions that are going to be going on over the next couple of years.
Right. Or the final sentence that in the end, that you all want to work with you to not just to support us as a program, but work with them to create one or to really can have ongoing dialogue.
So we're going to need to finish this letter discussion by 1:30.
I just have one more question.
So what I'd like to propose is that Commissioner Treese has the opportunity to raise her question, and then we checkpoint what is the feedback for any change as we've been asked to approve a letter for today.
This may be a sensitive question, but I'm going to ask it. It's the
Closing, in the closing
it's the
paragraph.
second to the last paragraph.
Mhm.
It starts with, while we would prefer not to have
Mhm.
tools.
Yeah.
Couldn't it just start with, I mean, why are we saying that?
Right.
Okay.
That's my question.
All
Is
right.
I think that sets us up for a debate about
Yeah.
tolling,
Okay.
when that's not what this is about.
Yeah.
So I would prefer if it started, we recognize the need to apply new tools.
Good. Good.
And I think that also gets to create a fully functional multimodal transportation system that Commissioner Rogers was getting at.
Good changes.
I think that's the clearest change
Mhm.
that I've seen from our discussion today.
Hmm.
Are there any others that you think you've gotten direction on that we
Well,
should checkpoint?
My own is that I would substitute the word support for create. I mean, I read it.
Where are we?
On the very last sentence. We're not just going to support their work. We would like
And
to actually
participate.
to create, to work with them, and kind of that's the ongoing dialogue.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
Can't think of
you
everything on
create
Friday
and
night.
support. Yeah.
You did a good job. You did a good job.
So, yeah.
And what's, could you clarify what's the next milestone that this goes into?
This will be submitted, then comments are due, I think, on the 12th, and then the OTC, we talks again about this on the 15th. I know, I've heard ODOT staff are already working, they've been hearing about these issues, they're already working on a new version to come out that would then be discussed at the OTC on the 15th. And then after that, I'm not sure how long, if there's gonna be another round, it depends, I think, on how much agreement or disagreement is.
Okay, so we may have to, depending upon how that September 15th meeting
Right.
goes, project out if we can continue to just take a
Yeah.
half-hour chunk of time in a work session for it, or if we need to plan more constructively.
I don't know if I should tell you this, but this is, there's just a lot more going
Yes,
on. Because
yes.
the regional transportation plan draft of their pricing policies came out last week.
Yep.
There are comments for that, staff's comments aren't due for that till late October. But there's just a lot, the Regional Toll Advisory Committee, there's just a lot coming at you from different committees.
I understand.
So,
So we ask
Try to
that-
keep it simple.
that staff work with Ms. Angie because we have a full plate. I know this isn't lost on you. We've got a complex portfolio and we somehow have to figure out how to make the most of commissioners' time to get done
Yeah.
what needs to get done.
Right.
So,
And-
not a criticism at
No,
all. Chris.
absolutely. It's just like, when does something float up enough that is like something you need to talk to each other about?
Chair Harrington, I have a clarification question.
Yes.
Are you saying to come back to us before the meeting for the OTC? Because I think before OTC votes on this.
We don't
there's
have another meeting till the 13th.
the 13th. Their meeting is the 15th.
Right, so as Chris said, this is the comment for the September 12th deadline, I thought, in advance of their September 15th meeting.
I think the Friday before that, correct me, Chris, if I'm wrong, they will publish what they're going to vote on. The packet will be published.
No, I think they're gonna release a version, another draft that responds to our comments and comments from others to introduce to the OTC on the 15th. But how that's actually gonna work, I'm not in the inside to know that. But I expect there will be additional opportunities after the 15th.
So we're all set?
Okay. Got a
I'm
couple of
unhappy now with
changes.
the explanation. I'm not unhappy. I just hope that we have chances.
Yep. Okay, all right. Thank you for your time on this.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. I know it's complex. Okay, so next we have the appointment to the Board of Property Tax Appeals. Oh, wow. This is the first time I've been in a meeting with the two of you face to face in the longest time. It's great to see you.
It's my first time meeting you both. Just to beat you, Chair Harrington.
Okay, that's great. Joy is there.
Okay, well, good morning, or guys, good afternoon. I have to change it a little bit, reschedule. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Board of Commissioners. My name, for the record, is Joe Nelson, Director of Assessment and Taxation. With me is Fred Ramstead, the Division Manager for Cartography and Records. My purpose today is to present the candidates for the Board of Property Tax Appeals. Last year, by the way, it's good to meet all of you as well. Proper introduction. My purpose today is to present the candidates for the Board of Property Tax Appeals. Last year, we had a very successful year, and I'm very appreciative of the 4 returning members. We are committed to appointing the individuals with a variety of multicultural experiences that reflect the many diverse communities of Washington County. 50% of the candidates are Black, Indigenous, or from communities of color. Additionally, we have a 50-50 representation of men and women. The purpose of the Board of Property Tax Appeals is more than weighing evidence and adjudicating values. It's an opportunity to demonstrate the transparent process, accuracy of the tax system, and it's a vital contributor to the public confidence of Washington County. The duration of the terms are 1 year. The board members must be residents of Washington County who do not work for the county or any other taxing district within the county. This year's candidates are Anthony Mills from District 1, John Junkin from District 2, Darlene Dick from District 3, and Heather Brown from District 4. The next step will be approving the candidates, and we have, this is on the board agenda for 2 weeks from now on the 20th. And to be brief, since we're catching up on time, I'm open for questions and comments,
Yes, I have a question.
please.
Is there a minimum number of appointments to the committee that are necessary?
A quorum is 2, but do we have additional?
No, we have a pool of however many people we get who are interested, and of that, we pick boards of at least 2, typically 3 for each hearing.
Okay.
The question I have, when, the terms are just 1 year.
1 year terms. It's annual reappointments.
Okay.
So you get to see us every year.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Seeing you's fine. I'm
Why,
just- I'm just-
why is that?
Statute.
Statute?
It's a statute.
Thank you.
Any further
Everybody
questions?
ready to
Yep,
have
I'm
that
good.
move forward? Great. Terrific. Well, thank you for being here to help us make sure we're ready to go.
All right. Thank
And
you.
Great.
Chair, I do just want to note, this is Joe Nelson's first meeting in front of your board since he was appointed as director, and really thankful for his leadership in an interim role, and also Fred's leadership with her team as well. We really have a stellar A&T team that is many times you may not see them. They're behind the scenes, but very impressed with their work and their dedication to Washington County.
Thank you.
It's all been so seamless that, and time has just flown by. So,
I do have one question of you.
Yes.
And that question is, it has nothing to do with these appointments. Every year, depending upon the economy, we see rises and falls in the number of people who are protesting, people who are angry. What's this year, meaning the one we just went through, and one coming up look like? I know we were forecasting one, the other
You're
one.
talking about protesting about their
Property
taxes.
Yeah, not about in general.
Yeah, I
but
just
on that
wanted to
thing.
clarify that.
That gets back to public confidence. When Measure 5 and Measure 50 rolled out, Measure 5 had 6,200 appeals. Last year, we were down to 144 appeals. So the huge
44?
144 resolved. And the majority of those are, we go out and we have a lot of public contact and work with folks. And a lot of those are, they're resolved ahead of time. So a huge amount of public work that goes into this. And it's really a partnership with the community right now.
I know probably just us are listening, but 144 is a minuscule number. How many accounts do you have? Do you have any idea?
244,000,
244,000.
224, sorry about that.
Only 144 were saying, I want to appeal it.
Very small percentage.
Great. Wow.
thank you.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work
Thank you.
to everyone on the team. So now we'll change to something completely different. I'd like to ask Aaron Doyle, our Senior Government Relations Manager, to take us through a topic on Washington County's, the Association of Oregon Counties, Washington County membership.
Thank you, Chair Harrington, and good afternoon, members of the board. I am Erin Doyle, your Senior Government Relations Manager. I believe I have a PowerPoint. I have to remember how to use this because I'm used to just asking for the next slide. So I'll ask myself for the next slide. Almost get that done right. To start with, this presentation is coming to you based on some conversations we've had over the last 6 months, I would say, about what AOC's dues are, values to Washington County. So I wanted to hopefully quickly, without talking too quickly, go through what the AOC due structures look like right now, make a comparison to how other associations charge their dues to their members, just to give us a sense of, is this the norm for how the fees are distributed across AOC members? And then briefly touch on some of the services and support that AOC provides as a result of those dues. And this is also, in addition to the conversation that your board has had amongst yourselves, also in preparation for the AOC District 8 meeting, which is currently scheduled for September 8th. It is my expectation that there will be 28th, sorry, the 28th. There is my expectation that one of the agenda items will be a conversation around the budget, the dues, and the services that we're receiving as District 8 members talk to AOC at that District 8 meeting.
I'll just reiterate, the question that I have raised, including at AOC meetings, is we approved a methodology a year ago. This was I think the first year that methodology was used. And so it's the first year we've been able to actually see how all the data was effectuated, given that setup. And by my analysis of the different versions, there are 7 counties who provide over 54% of the total general fund dues, being Multnomah County, Washington County, Clackamas County. So no surprises, we're the 3 most populous, followed by Lane County, Marion County, Jackson County, and then lastly, Deschutes County. And that was something that wasn't the range of the dues and who would be the largest payers for that budget wasn't a big point of it. It wasn't really an analysis at all when we set the formula up. Rather, it was very much a new structure and trying to be clear about what that structure was. So that's why I started asking questions about and making comments about, do we realize that this is what we've got? And partially it was because they were starting to realize that in order to achieve the aspirations that AOC has had for improving the relationship with the legislature and having the expanded staff that they have, not just for doing that legislative work, but for their operations, that put additional stress and burden on our budgets. The result of that is I was really pleased how the current treasurer, she wasn't reelected, so there will be a change in treasurer, started taking a look at that. And the finance committee, so it's not just on the finance committee, it also caused questions, which we discussed some of at the legislative committee retreat. And just more sense of value and how things are operating. So I'm still glad I asked the questions. And I think in the future for formulaic changes versus the operationalizing of the formulas, I think it will help provide a richer set of analysis than previously. That's all. So that's just, I wanted you to know where I'm square with the context.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. So to move quickly to this very busy due structure chart, I wanted to include just not just the basic information, but what that means for Washington County in 2022 and 2023. And I'm going to go into what's happening in 2023 in a minute. But there are 4 pieces to what dues are for members of AOC. First is a base rate, which is tiered based on population. Washington County is one of 2 counties in the top tier based on our population. That base rate in the tier structure has not changed from 2020 to 2023. The remaining revenue that is needed to come out of general fund dues payments is split in half, and half of it is prorated based on the county's percentage of assessed value for the state, and the other half is prorated to the county's population as a percentage of the state. So that means a large county with high assessed value like Washington County sees a higher multiplier for that proration. And then finally, there's a fourth column of other dues, which for us includes the CFTLC, voluntary and mandatory dues, which have not changed in 2022 and 2023. And then there is what's called a cap redistribution, which is going to come up in 2023. So overall, once you add those four columns together, if a county exceeds the cap, the amount over that is then redistributed to the remaining counties who are not over the cap. And is it expected in 2023 that Multnomah County will hit that cap rate that they are going to pay in membership dues? And that means the remaining 34 other counties that are staying in AOC will be redistributed about $367.27. That's not really an about. So that's also coming up in 2023. That cap is $206,000 in dues that Multnomah County will be expected to pay in 2023. So that's generally how AOC's new structure of dues works. I tried to figure out how the old structure worked, and I didn't, and I don't. It no longer is relevant as they are moving forward with this much more simple structure. So I wanted to just kind of benchmark where we've been over the last 5 years and where we expect to be in 2023. The bars are actual dues, and then the orange line reflects the percentage of increase from year to year. So it's really it's a fun Excel graph that I mostly understand, but you'll see from 2018 to 2019, there was no change in dues. And then in 2020, there was a significant increase and percentage of increase. And then between 2020 and 2021, very minimal increase. And then in 2022, we saw about a 6% change in our dues. And the expectation is approximately 14% change between 2022 in 2023, and that is based on a few factors. First, AOC has agreed to use new data every 3 years for population and assessed value, as opposed to trying to go out every year, gather that information. And 2023's budget is based on new estimated populations and assessed value. In addition, 2023 shows a reflection of the fact that Jackson County is withdrawing from AOC, and therefore the dues are going to be split amongst 35 members as opposed to 36. And that means that Multnomah County will hit its cap, and therefore that extra over their cap has to be redistributed. Again, less than $400, but still has an impact on the overall percentage of our dues from year to year.
Could you go through that one more time for me,
Okay.
please? So Jackson County's leaving.
Jackson County is leaving AOC.
Right.
They are withdrawing, and therefore they will no longer be a dues paying member. So the total amount of dues has to cover the full set of services. They are not reducing the amount of services. So it means
That's my question.
the
Okay.
total budget that has to
So
come
everybody
from
goes
general,
up.
it has to go up proportionally, as instead of having 35 members, particularly losing a member that has a high population and a high assessed value in comparison to other counties. Having them step out of AOC just significantly increases the amount of dues each remaining member.
Having them leave doesn't reduce the amount of service required.
At
I'm
one
just asking
county,
that question.
one county does not reduce so much that they can
Got it.
make
That's fair.
significant changes in their budget.
So part of what hasn't gotten coverage, let alone may not any pursuit at all, is looking at, given that we now have 6 counties who would be covering greater than half of the overall dues, should the other 30 counties be looked at to, in that prior slide that she had, we get hit once because we're a really high population. Then we get additional burden
Maybe.
because of being in the top tier, right? And there isn't any accommodation for saying, at what point do the top tiers, because we're also carrying our own Government Relations Department, at what point do we stop having to cover for the other 30 or so, right? Or where are there different tiers for looking at some of that? So that's just the kind of scenario thinking that I was hoping that they would go through. But there are some members of the Finance Committee that are willing to do that, but others who are just concerned about just their own pocketbook. I'll just put it simply that way. So there's only so much thinking people are willing to put in.
And Erin, I'm sorry, this is a very basic question. Where does the road maintenance piece come in here, or is that a whole separate structure?
The road fund.
The road fund is a different structure. It's not part of the revenues.
So this is not represented here at
This is
all.
not represented in the dues structure.
Staffing.
The staffing is part of it. Some of that is paid for out of the road fund. I haven't dug that deeply, but I can look further into it if that's something you want. I have gotten emails from AOC about this question. It's just committing it all to memory has not gone. But the road fund does pay for its staffing.
Okay.
Through the off the.
Well, I've never really been terribly involved other than about 3.5 years ago when Greg Malinowski sat on this board. He said, would you look at the financial statements because there's some problems, and there was a special assessment. And in your previous slide, you were showing fairly stable amount of dollars we were paying. A little confused because there were some special assessments because they said they were in the hole, but when I looked at the financial statements, they had money and it didn't make any sense to me. But are we paying dues on that former spike because of this, or was that a one-time assessment, or do you know?
This 2018 number was chosen for a reason. That is after that issue with the special assessment and all of the dues. They had to work through some significant budget process overhaul. They brought in specialists and have, in 2018, that's when they stabilized the due structure to not have that same issue about potentially needing to do a special assessment, and got clarity in their budget. So 2018, I chose that 5-year look back because that really reflects when AOC modernized everything it's doing related to its budget, and therefore didn't have the problems that were reflected more than 5 years ago. Thank you for that. So just to really quickly to go to Chair Harrington's point, this is, I did 2 pie graphs because it got really fun really fast. But I wanted to do the top 3 base tier rates. So that reflects, it says 5, I meant 6. I can totally do math. And the bottom 4 base rate tiers, you'll see that in the dark, those 6 counties, it's approximately 41% of the total dues that are brought in. And then when you expand that up to the 8 largest counties, which Chair, you mentioned, but just for some perspective, those 8 largest counties represent 74% of the state's assessed value and 73.9% of the state's population. So there's a lot of people and property reflected in those differences of 52 and 48% of the dues.
But we don't have 70% of the influence or vote when it comes to legislation that affects us directly. That's where it's been a real rub. Not that that's what I'm advocating for, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of topics where we've been double paying for representation. It's getting better, but there's still more room for improvement.
So I wanted to just kind of put that 52% into some perspective around other associations that often use a population-based threshold. And I picked 2 based on, similar geography, similar situations of, in the instance of Washington, the counties and how they sit population-wise. So first I picked the League of Oregon Cities because they conveniently put a really handy chart that I could just borrow. but also really reflect the same geographic distribution of population and a little more pointedly. So this is, the chart is taken from their budget report, and you can see that their largest city pays $257,000 in dues. That is, of course, Portland. But what they do differently is that they use a population base rate, just like AOC does, but then each tier of population pays a different percentage on a multiplier on their population, with their top tier paying 0.42 and those below paying slightly more per person. So they kind of scale it that way. For their distribution, you'll see the eight largest cities represent 50% of the city's population and provide 41% of the association's dues. In Washington State Association of Counties due structure, I will note that their budget was a little bit tough to get through because they are so differently structured than we are, but they're also coming across this services versus cost problem. So they went through two scenarios, one which was a massive spike in dues in 1 year, or over 3 years increasing a significant but not as massive increase. So they divide also on pretty small number of counties making up large portions of their population. In their due structure over their 5 funds that they use to calculate their total dues, each fund has a different base rate, population multiplier, or identification of the services needed by county. So all in, they mostly use a system of base rates and population to decide their dues. And it means that their 6 largest counties pay 69% of the dues to their association. Yeah. So that's as deep into the numbers as I can get, because it's been a minute since I've read it. So I just did that for purposes of comparing AOC to other similarly situated membership organizations. The next thing I wanted to get into really quickly is what value do we get as Washington County? And one of the things that this is also going to be important for your District 8 meeting is the support to county departments and the affiliate membership organizations. My expectation is that there will be a bylaws discussion about who can continue to participate in some of the affiliate member organizations based on the county's membership in AOC. So one of the values that AOC can bring is in these affiliate member organizations, which cover the administrators, assessors, clerks, district attorneys, engineers and surveyors, justices of the peace, sheriffs, tax collectors, and treasurers as affiliate members. Participation of our department heads or county administrator would be reliant on AOC's our county's continued participation in AOC. This is a reflection of having a county leave, but having their department heads influencing the affiliate members. And that is a conversation that's gone on through a bylaws discussion at AOC. The second piece goes to Chair Harrington's point that one of the big things we rely on from AOC is advocacy. There are 6 steering committees: governance and revenue, health and human services, public safety, natural resources, transportation and community development, and veterans. Any commissioner can sit on any one of these steering committees. They have a chair and a co-chair, and sometimes a chair, a co-chair, and co-chair. From there, the steering committees make policy recommendations that go up to the legislative committee, which has a set roster of who may be on it, which includes the board members, and then the chairs or co-chairs of each steering committee, plus some affiliate members who all get to vote on those legislative policies and directions. What AOC gets out of that and brings to its broad membership is enhanced advocacy on behalf of all counties, hopefully. And that's where participation in the legislative process helps us as your government relations team focus even more on the things that are very Washington County specific in places where we have the most need or the greatest drive from your board for us to move forward. On a GR to GR staff level, there is a lot of coordination that occurs, and they allow us to refocus ourselves sometimes. Instead of hitting all 1,000 bills, we just tell AOC what we need, and we get that partnership out of them. And then we provide them with data to help them enhance their statewide organizational perspective. And then finally, AOC does work at NACO. They have those conversations in the steering committees, in the legislative committee, and then can bring propositions to NACO for federal advocacy. Primarily, AOC has focused on the public lands, PILT, payment in lieu of taxes, sorry, and the Secure Rural Schools Funds, or SRS, and then making sure that the federal partners who own large swaths of public land in our counties are making sure that they're keeping track of that. And then the final value for that AOC provides to Washington County is the education that they can provide us. The District 8 meetings, we are structured a little bit differently. In District 8, we call for what the agenda is going to be in District 8. Many of the other districts do not have that luxury. And so we use that as a learning opportunity for the counties in District 8. They have the AOC annual conference, and then they put out publications to make sure that we're all aware of the broader things that are going on.
I would just like to add in terms of value. Ms. Doyle, you covered the territory very well. I would like to add that the kind of updates to steering committee procedures, agenda setting, and interactions, recommendations to the legislative committee, then from there to the board, that those updates should, I think, help a lot because things were just being called into question after the steering committee of that very same day. And, you know, like a sailboat on the Columbia River, you're sailing one way and all of a sudden you're tacking in a totally different direction. And it's like, why? Because one member has brought in a perspective and others just wanted to move on. And it did reparable harm. And so I think those improvements will help significantly and help ensure that those who, in my view, have been carrying more of the dues will not feel as ignored or discounted as previous. So it's not necessarily a bylaws change or a formula change, but rather a procedural change. And I think I saw and heard at that retreat, which is one of the reasons why I attended in person out in Umatilla County, that things should improve greatly, and I have confidence in that. So we'll see.
So this is just to reiterate the question. I know this was a lot of really fast information. As we go through the process of continuing to work with AOC, as they continue to modify their processes, and in working with our fellow GR counterparts, not only at the county level, but at AOC, we want to make sure that you have the information you need. So is there any further information needs that you have prior to September 28th or conversation that the board would like to have amongst itself? Otherwise, I am done.
Commissioner Fye, can you hear us? She was supposed to be joining by phone. Is she there?
Yes, Madam Chair, she is. I'm showing her online.
Okay, great. Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you. I'm here, Chair Harrington.
Okay. So that meeting is on Wednesday, the 28th, not Monday, as I think we've met previously. I thought I saw a draft agenda recently, and I have the similar concern as before. And are we going to be able to get to all of that in one day or one portion of a day? So
Just so you know, we've given that feedback to Commissioner Fisher that it's too full.
okay,
So, and that's in the works right now. It's really on her desk.
Okay.
at this point.
okay,
But the feedback is there.
okay.
So may I?
Because Commissioner Treese is our vice chair at District 8.
but I don't get to control the agenda until next year. Just say, I can advise, but.
Well, we'll be voting with our feet if we're
Yeah.
not able to stay for.
Well,
longer
exactly,
meeting.
and that's,
Yep.
and that's true.
Yep.
So I would just like to thank you, Erin, for this. This is really, really helpful, and it's put into perspective a lot of things for me. I appreciate it, and I also want to thank you, Chair, for going to Umatilla for that meeting, because I think that, I know I had a lot of anxiety about how AOC was operating and what our role was there, and you both have helped me understand that, and I'm feeling more calm. I still think that we need to make sure that we're present, that we're active in meetings like the annual meeting in Eugene that's coming up in October, November.
November.
So those are, we do need to be there for those things and to be present for votes and that type of thing. Otherwise, we're not actualizing our membership dues. You know, it's our role now to take the reins and be active, be engaged, and do the things that we need to do.
So one thing I don't know how this falls on the agenda currently, but we haven't had a discussion at the District 8 meetings around across our District 8 members, how do we support leadership of the organization? And I'm already getting emails from folks who are lining up to serve as second vice chair and other officers, and
To run for second vice chair.
yeah, and we not only District 8, but across these more urban counties need to look at what's happening at the leadership of the organization. Otherwise, we end up with all rural leadership in the organization, which has an effect too. So we'll see.
Well then.
I don't have anything more to add, and I just want to say thank you again.
Because we are going to have to approve the dues at the November conference, right?
I believe that's,
And we've got the bylaws coming in.
that will
at
also
the
be,
District 8 meeting, and then, or,
all the information will be presented to you at the district meeting. That is part of the purpose of those District 8
Which is the
meetings.
first priority of that meeting.
Yeah, and then the annual membership meeting, which takes place
On
at the conference
Thursday,
in
yeah.
November. That's when you'll vote on proposed bylaw changes and to seal the budget.
yeah,
Do you have the dates of that?
11th through the 18th. The
Thank you.
11th is Monday.
Sure, it's
I
on my
think
calendar.
the 17th may be Thursday.
It's,
I have too many days.
there was too many, it's not the 11th because that is Veterans Day and if
And
one, no,
that's,
it's the 15th through the 17th of
Thank
November.
you.
It is a Tuesday through Thursday down in Eugene. If
We
you
have
would
a
like to
women's
attend,
meeting on Monday.
if you would like to attend, make sure your assistants know that and they'll get you registered through Janet.
Quick, just for my edification, 'cause I don't follow it like some other people are involved, but is there any appetite at all for doing a service-based budget instead of a population-based? And I understand that's not popular under federal tax codes, but what's it, but top 10%, and some of the people are in here, and top 25%, a lot of you are in there. They pay 70 to 80% of all income taxes. So that tells you a whole lot of people don't pay, half the population pays zero. So I would think that in terms of a AOC budget, they're not with an appetite to say, let's go something on a service base. They want population based because it would curtail their investment. So is there, and maybe that's what the chair was getting at, is there no appetite to take a look at how things are purchased? It's not on a purchase basis, it's on a population base.
If I understand your question, Commissioner Rogers, the service-based model is something they actually used to use. In the 2022 restructuring was to put all of that into one. let me start back over again. They used to have separate funds based on specific types of service as a way of accounting for all of the revenue needs that they had, and then had a formula for how that was put out. I think, if I recall correctly, was still population based. So there's a the modification that as I understand it, that was made in 2022 was around adding assessed value actually into the equation, but also not separating things out into different fund structures so that way they could flex their budget appropriately to meet the service needs of the membership for what AOC is to accomplish, where the roads funds and the county roads program has its budget, but then AOC as a structure that does the education, the coordination, and the lobbying is all considered, and the executive director and her
I
team.
don't dwell on it, but lobbying to me is a separate issue entirely, not necessarily part of their internal, other than the coordination part, because we have our own people, and probably all 5 or 6 counties or 7 counties probably have, maybe 8, 9.
Actually, oddly, all of Eastern Oregon actually put together a consortium, and they have hired their own lobbyists as well. So there are multiple lobbyists that work in the client space of counties. It's just that Washington, Multnomah, and Clackamas and Lane County have the most externally facing and larger teams, but Eastern Oregon counties also have a separate lobbyist that also we work in coordination with, particularly on gain share issues.
Good for them. That's great. Yeah, thanks.
I could never figure out the 2018 structure. So
I
that's
stopped.
where, to me, the current formula I can at least follow. Though as the budget needs were escalating at the same time that our budget needs were becoming more and more difficult over the last, 2 years to date, that's where I was getting concerned. So, but I think it's improving.
At some point, I thought I heard Commissioner Fai's voice. I don't know if she had a question.
I did, Aaron. Thank you. I have a quick question for you, Aaron, and I'm hoping you can reconcile this for me. It's a comment you made about when you were describing how helpful AOC is to you and to your team as a government relations affair, just as lobbyists. And an experience I had when I attended some of the meetings, and that is in relation to how issues put forward. So you said something like they are helpful. You could just tell AOC what you want in terms of issues rather than tackling 200 bills. And then the experience that I had is this is based legislative agendas or bills to support is based on majority votes. And I think I don't is this new formula gonna change that dynamic?
Commissioner Fai, so to clarify what I was talking about, amongst the GR team, we meet with AOC's GR team as well on a fairly regular basis. And where there is our, for example, in the public records and public meeting space, where there is universal direction that both your board has given to your GR team and AOC's board has given to their GR team, we very often will turn to them to take those leadership roles instead of trying to manage, like the 14 bills that are directed at public records, and work through them and then assist where needed. When it comes to how AOC adopts its positions and sets its legislative agenda, nothing in the formula changes that. That's the pattern and practice that is set up by the board of directors, the legislative committee, and the bylaws. And so does any change to how votes set the agenda for AOC would occur in a bylaws discussion, which was not part of the scope of what I was covering today. Does that help clarify?
Yeah, absolutely. But I thought I heard you say something about changing the bylaws based on this. So it's not bylaws, that section of it?
It's a different section of the bylaws as far as
Oh.
how the affiliate memberships relate back to AOC membership, I believe is the one that I was discussing. So, for example, should a county drop out like Jackson County has, the change in bylaws would mean that their affiliate, they could not have their county administrator continue to be part of the county administrators association that is an affiliate of AOC. So that's the bylaws that's changed. That is one of the changes that is under consideration. I do not have the rest at my fingertips, but can give you more information prior to the 28th if you would like.
No, you don't have to do extra work. I'm trying to, in my head, trying to balance the value for Washington County. And then when we are players at these tables, the dynamic that exists between rural and urban counties. And then what gets pushed forward as an AOC sometimes might not be the best interest for urban counties. So I'm just having that dilemma myself in my head. But if you're recommending that we participate, thumbs up for me. But there is a really, we need to have a robust conversation about the urban and rural dynamic that exists within IOC.
I think that's an ongoing conversation, and part of what the legislative retreat that Chair Harrington attended was to be part of that conversation. AOC's executive director and legislative affairs director are both fully committed to having this ongoing, continuing conversation about how to serve all AOC members and not just a portion of them, and how to work their processes. And I don't know if the chair wants to add anything to what she heard in Umatilla as to this approach, but.
No, I think you've covered enough of it today, and I've spoken previously about what we should see as change. So I'm looking forward to hearing more recent information from AOC myself in terms of the dues proposal, because you mentioned here 14%. Oh, and I had that in front of me, whereas my calculations were from 2022 to 2023, we were going to experience a 20.3%. So
I'll check my math.
that's
but
what
more
got
like-
my attention previously. So we'll all have to catch up and get the packet for the District 8 meetings. But you also reflected the discussion around the affiliate members that was at the most recent Board of Directors meeting as well, hence what's going to the district meeting. So thank you.
Thank you all for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that come up.
Thanks for staying on top of it all. Really appreciate it. Okay, so let's just check in. It's 2:15. We have 1, 2, 3 topics. Are we still good to go for today, you think? Okay, great. So we'll move forward then with an HR topic. Presentation updates to policy 504 risk management program rules.
And I think Joe wants his cup so he can maybe get a refill of coffee this afternoon.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Eva Labonte. I'm your Chief Human Resources Officer. And with me is my esteemed colleague, Mark Jennings, who is our risk manager. And we are here to present some changes that we have worked on with our County Counsel, Tom Carr, to update our risk management program rules, which is policy 504. I guess we have our own clicker. Great. All right. So these rules have not been updated for just about 10 years. So we are significantly overdue to revise our rules. We've gone through them piece by piece, and we have made some de minimis administrative changes just for languages. For example, changing HR manager to Chief Human Resources Officer, things like that. But we have some specific changes that we would like to go over with you. And before we bring this policy to your board for approval on the 27th of September, we just wanted to go over these changes with you to see if you have any comments or feedback, or if you're in agreement with these changes we're proposing. So on section 3, we'll go over each of these individually. We would like to talk about our settlement authority levels that we have in our risk management program rules. And in section 7, we need to add language to address our uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage. Right now, our risk management program rules are silent in this area, so we need to make sure we have clarification on that for consistent processing. And in section 8, we do need to provide some clarity on property loss claims and how they are paid by risk management, again, to add clarity and consistency in our processes. And in section 10, we do want to update the workers' compensation program section to reflect that we have now implemented a managed care organization for our organization that has, when we have complicated workers' compensation claims. So we will go through, like I said, each of these pieces individually. The first section is the settlement authority. So our settlement authority, we are requesting that it is updated due to the costs of claims, medical costs, auto claim costs, attorney's fees. All of those things have risen dramatically in the last 10 years, which is why we're asking for these settlement authority changes. So currently, we have our setup so our risk manager can approve claims that are up to $10,000. With a lot of these claims end up having to do with auto damage claims, things like that. And because those costs have risen so dramatically, we're asking for that to be increased to $25,000. In the last 5 years, we have had 16 claims at that level. And our county administrator settlement authority currently is silent on that piece. We would like to propose that any claims between $25,000 and $100,000 can be settled at that level. And in the last 5 years, we've had 6 of those claims. Our risk management settlement authority, and as a reminder, our risk committee includes our county council, our risk manager, and our county administrator or designee. And we are asking, currently they have up to $25,000 of settlement authority. We are asking to move that between $100,000 and $300,000. And then your Board of County Commissioners would have authority over $300,000 and higher. We've had 4 of those claims in the last 5 years. And currently any claim over $25,000 comes to your board for approval. So I open to questions or comments as we pause on each section to make sure that we give you opportunity to voice your opinions.
Is this consistent with other counties of our similar size?
That's a great question.
So I was able to talk to Clackamas County and Lane County just about the risk manager's authority, and Clackamas County, the risk manager has $75,000 of authority, and Lane County, the risk manager has $50,000 worth of authority. We know, Washington County is typically a little conservative, so we went low on that authority level. But those are what the other 2 counties I was able to contact.
And this does align with our contracting procurement authority that was changed in the last year or 2. So your board sees contracts that are over $300,000 for approval. So this aligns with that $300,000 limit.
So we're proposing 25, and Lane and Clackamas are at 20.
They're at 50 and 75, just for the risk manager position.
That first bullet.
That first bullet, yeah.
Are we handcuffing ourselves in any way to have this be so low?
If you're okay, I speak of that. It would actually be my preference. It would be higher, but we were trying to be conservative, like I said, and respectful. We have the risk manager level authority. It's to our advantage to have that level have a little bit higher authority, because the longer a claim is open, the more expensive they become. And oftentimes we have opportunities early in a claim to settle with a fair settlement. And if we have to go to higher levels to get that authority, the delay can often cause someone to get an attorney, and then the attorney gets involved and the claims escalate in value. And so,
So I assume that Ms. Angie and Mr. Carr have been part of putting this proposal together. So with that data you just received, I'd like to hear their thoughts too.
Well, I wanted to add, so remember, this is about when we've hurt somebody, when somebody's been hurt by some action of the county. And if it's our fault, the best thing we can do for our community is say, oh, we're sorry, and pay their claim. And the longer that takes, the worse it is for the person. And the worse they feel about the interaction. And so the quicker we can get through the process, for me, the better. And so the difference between the three levels is meaningful, because if Mark can solve something with a phone call, if we've done something wrong, we've broken somebody's car mirror or done something like that just by accident, but those things happen. If we can get that done quickly, it's better service to the community. And in risk management for a government, that's a big part of it. And Mark talks about it as a risk manager, and how do we reduce the liability? Because that also does that. Because when someone goes out and gets a lawyer involved and feels they have to sue us, it does two things. One, it costs more money, but it sends a poor message to the person.
So what are you advocating, that instead of 25,000 for the risk management, given that those are the data pieces he's just given us, that instead, now that we've all had the chance to hear that we should do something different?
I don't think that's absolutely necessary. I'm fine with this proposal, because the other two steps aren't that much more complicated. So Mark solving something with a phone call is one thing. If he has to then talk to the county administrator, that's just one more phone call. If he has to bring Eva and me in, that's a third. It delays it, but not that much. And it does provide a sort of check on it. So I actually recommend this proposal, even though Lane and Clackamas may be a little higher at that first level.
I just uncomfortable with getting 2 data points for just one of the tiers when we have a proposal that has been vetted with our team across 4 tiers. That's all. Ms. Andy, did you have anything more you wanted to say?
I was going to say I'm comfortable with the settlement authority, because from the checks and balances, if there's a situation that Mark feels we can settle, he knows how to get a hold of me, and we can make that quickly to resolve the issue.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the collaboration. It's always better to have more people in their minds at work when you're working on a claim settlement. So that's why I advocate for these levels as well. I think they're appropriate.
I'm fine.
I think we can move on unless someone's.
Yeah, just real quick, the numbers of settlements that you quoted in your information here, was that like on the risk committee settlement authority, was added 100,000? And what would have happened if we'd have made it 300,000?
That's a great question. So because your settlement authority is currently lower, those claims all did come to the board for approval. So those are the number of claims that would have been the case if we had the different.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. Wasn't, okay.
And why since this policy's been in place for over 10 years through August of 2012, why did you choose to give us 5 years of data versus 10 years of data?
The costs have changed a lot in claims in the last 5 years, simply because of inflation and medical costs and
all right.
things like
You-
that.
You did
So,
say that. Okay.
yeah, so we felt that was more appropriate.
Okay. Thank you.
One question and one comment. First 2 levels, I don't have a problem with. 300,000 is a bridge too far for me. I suspect the majority will go there, but they tend to be political settlements, and it's much better if we have some conversation from electeds in that. So that's my comment on the 3 levels. First 2, fine. Who is oversighting you in terms of the settlement?
As far as the settlements at below the board level, is that what you're asking? Yeah, so the county administrator is certainly aware of them, but the risk committee, so your county council, your risk manager, and the
Does she
county.
sign off on them?
Yeah, we go through the claim. We have a meeting and explain the situation, the risks, the mitigation, what this means. So it's a pretty lengthy conversation with a lot of detail to make sure that we're making the correct choice.
And I'll also note that the claims that you would possibly be seeing Tom Carr gives you a weekly update on pretty much anything. And Tom, you can confirm that in the.
Well, so on any major litigation, you're going to hear about it from me long before we settle it.
Because frankly, and it's just my comment, the county administrator is always good to get her opinion. I kind of like to know the risk analysis from the attorney, and he says, it looks like a good one. I just think oversight of everything is important, so.
We do have a monthly meeting with risk management and county council where we go over every open claim.
Could you remind us again who's on the risk management committee?
That is Tom Carr, your county council, your risk manager, and then the county administrator or designee. Currently, I'm serving in that role since I was the former risk manager.
All the players. It's good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So the next section deals with uninsured motors and underinsured motorists. Our policy has not spoken to this in the past, and it's something we need to add. And just for clarification's sake, what an uninsured motorist and underinsured motorist claim is. Basically, that is if you're, so you're driving in your car and an uninsured motorist strikes your vehicle, this is coverage on your own policy that would step in place to cover what that person should have paid you, but they weren't unable to because they did not have insurance. If they have no insurance at all, then it's an uninsured motorist claim. If they have some insurance, but it's not enough to cover your damages, then it would be an underinsured claim. Again, this is something that we would like to add because it provides clarification on what the county would cover if this kind of an accident occurred. There's some statutes listed here, but those are just in there. They describe what an uninsured motorist claim is. And then one of them describes what the minimum amount of coverage available that you have to offer is, and that's $25,000, $50,000 total. What we were proposing is that we add into this language that the county would cover $25,050. I checked with 3 other counties, Clackamas County, Multnomah County, and Lane County. They all 3 have similar policies and similar limits that they're proposed that they have in their policies. And so we'd be consistent with similar counties. Again, this is important because without this, it creates a situation where we could have unlimited liability. And so we want to try and avoid that situation.
You have a question? No, sorry. Wasn't looking for your signals. I didn't see which one you were giving. Sorry.
No questions?
Keep going.
Okay.
All right.
That's just wise.
Yeah, it's very wise for us to have that in there. Property damage section, this is probably the least interesting or least important, but this is just clarifying how we handle claims when they do occur. And so a property claim would be, we damage someone's car, we damage a building, those kinds of things. And just clarifies that we pay actual cash value for those items. And that's actual cash value means what the item is worth less what the depreciation is on it. So in other words, if you bought a brand new car and you drove it for 3 years, it's not worth what you paid for it initially. It has 3 years of depreciation on it. It also clarifies things that we don't cover, which is like wear and tear, maintenance, and those kind of items. And then it documents that we're going to pursue subrogation against the party that caused damage if that's applicable. So again, these are pretty minimal changes, but just documentation sake so that it's more clear. Questions? And then the last section talks about adding to the workers' compensation section, the managed care organization. This is something that we recently added to the workers' compensation program. What this allows is we've partnered with the 2 healthcare providers, Kaiser and Providence, and they have a program where they will oversee workers' compensation claims to make sure that our injured employees are receiving the best care possible. Sometimes people who get injured get with doctors who are not really trying to get the person better. They're just trying to kind of continue the person going to the doctor over and over again without trying to push a resolution to get the person to actually get better and get back to work. And so these organizations on certain claims will be involved, and they'll oversee and they'll give advice and try and help make sure the employee is getting the best care possible. in partnership with that, we also have another program called Ready Rebound, which we've instituted with the sheriff's office. It's a pilot program. And this company does really great work with first responders. That's their specialty. And so they work with first responders to make sure that they get quick access to really great care for serious injuries. So in other words, they partner with some of the doctors that help with like professional sports teams. And so when an officer gets injured, they get them to those really good doctors who are used to handling these types of injuries and get those officers the best treatment they can and get them back to work. And so these are all measures we've kind of put in place to enhance the workers' compensation program to make sure that the employees are getting the best care possible.
And I will add that some physicians are not really aware of how workers' compensation works. So they take sort of a wait and see attitude on more of the serious claims and not understanding that we would like our employees to feel better. Because injuries don't end when the workday ends. Injuries continue 24 hours a day. So we want our employees to feel good and get that more aggressive treatment so they can feel better. And this is something that is for our more serious claims, not for minor claims. So we just want to make sure our employees have the best care possible. And we've had really good feedback from the sheriff's office on the rebound pilot project. They really, really appreciate it quite a bit. And anyone in the sheriff's office who takes part in the rebound program does not need to join the managed care organization with a serious claim because they're already getting that great care from rebound.
Any other questions on that?
I think it's a great program. Two questions really quickly. Sure. Is that subject to negotiations with bargaining units?
We have actually bargained that into our negotiations that are open, and we let them all know. Yeah.
Perfect. And then secondly, are we self-insuring in this area? Or
We are still self-insured with a $750,000 retention for everyone but the sheriff's office. They have $1 million claim retention because our insurer was uncomfortable with the $750,000 retention. And then we have excess insurance on top of that.
I assume that you're reinsuring above the retention limit. And you don't think this is going to spike that amount? I don't know the providers that you're going to use.
Yeah. We actually think it's going to help.
Okay.
Because the claims that linger are often somewhat expensive. People are on medication, for example, they're off work, or they're on light duty. Our hope is that this will help them get away from that medication and light duty and get them fully functional in their life as well as work.
Interesting.
We're self-insured for workers' comp versus across the board, right?
Right.
We're self-insured for liability as
Yeah.
well.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Different program. Yeah.
But not for health insurance.
Correct.
That's what I was trying to.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right.
And I think this goes back on the 20th.
20th. Okay.
It's September 20th.
Great.
Okay. So they also included in the packet a highlighted version of the language as well as a red line version of the language. I might say myself really appreciated the highlighted version, though I've often been a consumer of the red line version. I just wanted to note the care that you provided. Commissioner Fye, did you have any questions that we should check in on?
No, thank you. No questions for me, Chair Harrington.
Okay, so as Mr. Carr clarified, this will come to the board in our board packet for action on September 20th. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair and members of the board, if I can just add, David Martinez is leading a process to redesign our review of administrative policies. As Ms. Labonte shared, this has not had a full review for 10 years. The last update, though, was in 2017. So our goal is to get on a 3-year cycle for all of our policies. So that information will be coming to your board in the near, I would say in this upcoming quarter of what that policy will be. Policy review will be.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next topic for our work session is the budget process redesign. Welcome, Mr. Munn. This is, I think, our first work session in person with you as our CFO.
Be easy on me.
No, you're a CFO.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair and Board of Commissioners. I'm glad to be here. Just for the record, my name is Greg Munn. I'm the CFO and Treasurer for the county. I'm happy to be sitting in front of you for this first time to share with you some concepts and opportunities in terms of our budget and financial planning processes moving forward. And so what I'll share with you today has been reviewed across different aspects of the county in both our leadership and department heads, and also at the staff level of our accounting and finance folks. So we had the chance to vet it pretty well before bringing it here to you. So while we're here today to talk about the redesign of the budget process, it's important to note that the elements that we're talking about today don't stand alone, but rather they are components of an overall One Washington County visioning process and are directly connected to community strategic plan. So generally speaking, in terms of workflow, a visioning process would be followed by a strategic planning process, which would be followed by a budgeting process. But as we're working on developing these now, we're in tandem working on our strategic plan and our budgeting process together. So I don't want to, it's really easy to get one in front of the other, but the budget process will really trail, once we get these set up, really trail the strategic plan process. So. Okay, so for today, there are a few items that I want to go over. First off, I want to, well, before I even start, so this graphic is one of our templates, and the picture that's there is one of the templates as well. And so I happened to just grab it out of habit because it was there. And then a little bit later, probably maybe even yesterday when I was working on this, I thought I probably couldn't have picked a better graphic because it really defines the process of visioning with strategic plan and budgeting and even outcomes all together in sort of this nice mesh. So if I do a good enough job today, I'll be able to explain that in that sort of nice gear sort of way. So the first bullet point there, GFOA strategic plan. GFOA stands for the Government Finance Officers Association. It's an international association of people like me. And we had a roundtable on July 14th, if you remember. And we had the conversation was regarding the creation of a community strategic plan. And so as we move through this, we'll review a few of those slides as refreshers. So while the GFOA focused on several components of the strategic plan, we'll focus more specifically later on as we roll through the presentation on the budget component of it. And we'll discuss the redesign strategy. What does this mean? Why do it? And how important, and more importantly, how to proceed with more specific tasks. And then we'll talk also about outcomes and several opportunities for key actions there. So the next slide, you'll remember from July 14th. This was the agenda for that roundtable. And the three pieces that we focused on there, those three sub-bullets, GFOA focused on the financial foundation framework, rethinking the strategic plan, and then incorporating budget and financial planning. So what we'll do today is focus down in on that third bullet with the red circle around it. So this is another slide off the deck from the GFOA presentation. And this one, it says it talks about building a budget system, but if you read through some of the details, it's really more than a budget system. It's more of a management system. And so I think probably we use this is a good example to build from, but also we probably should look at this more as a management system. And I can refer to that as if you look down to probably your second to last bullet, it talks more specifically about budgeting. But this is a good slide to start from. And it really rolls right into the next slide, which is a similar slide that we saw from the GFOA, but I need to give credit to Rachel. need to give credit to Rachel, because Rachel took that slide, which is really what GFOA talked about as a budget system, and really embellished it to more of a management system. So this is probably my favorite graphic of the whole presentation because it puts everything more or less down into one piece of paper. It talks about, from the beginning, the Washington County Equity Resolution, how that rolls into our visioning process, the One Washington County Vision, what that means in terms, or how that rolls into the strategic plan. And from there, it fans out into the other more operational components of the county. So I'll just hit on a couple of these. The first one is the operating budget. That's what we all know and do every year, is the operating budget process. That's where we take our annual goals and allocate resources to those. You're also probably fairly familiar with the accounting and reporting box to the all the way to the right. This is where we'll have our financial report, we have our budget document, we have some financial reports that come to the board as well at that point. But one that we don't talk about too much is in the upper right-hand corner, which is really a key component of the overall management plan, or management system, I should say. And that's taking the goals of the strategic plan, the objectives of this strategic plan, applying resources to those, and then measuring how well we're doing. And a lot of times you'll hear outcomes, outputs, things like that. But the one piece that's probably just as important is to complete that circle and use that feedback from the performance measures back to revisiting the strategic plan. So if you can imagine a dotted line from performance measures back to the strategic plan, I think it would complete that circle. The box in the very center in the bottom, the long-term financial plan, this is looking at the objectives of the strategic plan, and can we afford to do these in the long run? How are we going to pay for those? To the left is our capital budget, capital improvement plans. You've heard us probably talking about those as well. We've talked about the operating side of the budget, but what about the infrastructure side of the budget? What about the side of the budget that pays for buildings and pays for building maintenance, puts new roofs on buildings? How are we going to, what do we need to do over the next 5 years, and how are we going to pay for that? So we're in the process right now of developing a CIP as well. So this here is a great graphic, I think.
Could you highlight the dark blue versus the light blue?
So the light blue boxes are those that need to be developed or reviewed. So those are in process. I would actually, so we do have master plans which are in place. We have an operating budget process right now, even though we're talking about potentially redesigning that. We have an equity resolution. We do have accounting reporting processes like the ACFR and the budget document. I will be talking a little bit more about expanding on those. So some may be light blue, some may be dark blue, and some might be kind of a shade in between.
Thank you.
Yep. So this is also a slide from the last roundtable, and it, just going to kind of read it here, defining the problem. It's talking about rethinking budgeting and defining the problem. I sort of looked at that and said, well, why don't we define maybe what the challenge is, or define some of the opportunities that we have to move forward. And then, the question is, well, what is a budget redesign process? And so I took the liberty to create one. And I think this is probably in draft and maybe in draft in perpetuity, but I'll just go ahead and read it. As the county moves forward with the Design the One Future initiative to create a One Washington County organization, the budget process is a key component to be examined and modified to ensure it is a mechanism that supports the allocation of resources in accordance with the goals and objectives of the strategic plan. I need to have a pause in there so you can take a breath. So that's what a redesign process is it's a continual way to look at the way we allocate our resources and try to find better ways to do that. So what do we do moving forward? Well, a strategy for that is to improve and develop the budget strategic plan relationship through a redesign of sort of our day-to-day budget practices, our fiscal planning methods, internal procedures, forecasting, accounting techniques, towards those considered best practices for local governments. And I would add on to that, and to support the community strategic plan and county vision. If I was redoing this slide right now, I would have made it a little bit longer. So where do we go from here? So I'm going to go through, I think, 6 or 7 objectives and talk about some key changes to our budgeting process. And then also I want to throw in some more specific activities so we can put a little bit of meat on the bone. So the first objective would be to create a multi-year financial strategy and plan supported by mission-driven and data-supported analytics. So actually, before I do that, I actually meant to look back, and I wanted to say, you know, we're spending a lot of time looking forward and talking about changes and how we can do better. But I just really want to take a pause and look back at those folks who really developed the budget this last year: Judy Lynn, Christine Thornhill, Mandy Chen, Michael Clark, who came over from the library, and just dove into our budget process and really helped us get through it. Ting Ting Wang was part of that. And of course, Rodney Rhodes. Can't forget Rodney. He was a big piece of making this happen. So, but moving forward, one of the activities is to create a county budget office. So I've done that a couple of times and it's been real successful. And I'm excited that we can say we've officially started that, and we've created that by hiring our first budget manager, which is Steve Kang. I think you've all had a chance maybe to see a little blurb on him that came out on Horizon. So Steve's great. He's been here about a month, and he's doing a great job. So, and then the other activity there is to centralize some of our key countywide budget functions and bring those internally and work on doing better at those. For example, long-term financial forecasting, support to the board for decision-making, financial support, and also working with our ACAs and our department heads on projects that are important to them.
Could I ask a clarifying question? By creating the county's budget office, when I looked at this slide previously, I misinterpreted, I think, the meaning of the second bullet. I was looking to answer the question. So as a result of having a formalized county budget office, what will that provide for us? Either what challenge might that address? What opportunity does it help create, which is separate from your second bullet? Or was I supposed to? I just confused myself.
It's okay. I can take a swing at that.
Okay, thanks.
So historically, and again, I've only been here a couple of months, but my understanding is the budget function was buried pretty deep in the organization in the past. I think as we spend more time focusing on the impact of our decisions financially in the future, it's imperative to have more of a centralized focus, a centralized presence that looks at those impacts long-term and effectively works for the board.
As one
And
Washington County.
Exactly. So it's raising up that level of importance and putting it more, there'll be more spotlight on that.
Yeah. It sounds to me like it is, it helps ensure budget resilience as the organization continues to move ahead, as we've talked about under the One Washington County effort.
It's also a means to provide the board with clear scenarios in your decision-making. So as we are in a fiscally constrained environment, if the board does want to move forward with a scenario, what are those opportunities based on existing revenues that may have been department-centric versus what is the full One Washington County portfolio?
Yeah.
And levers for the board to pull.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Angie, and also to you, Mr. Munn, for patience with my question, because often I find constituents and employees asking, okay, or even newspaper reporters, so we hear you're making changes. Why are you making changes? Or we hear there are changes. How come? And so I'm trying to make sure I look with that lens at these sorts of changes and make sure I at least understand it so I can better explain it ahead. Thank you.
That's great. And I would also say that proposals that come to the board for your decisions to make, we want to make sure that we're looking through them with a second set of eyes, at least on the financial side of it. So to make sure that what's being presented, the goal here is, in terms of this, is to present the best financial information, regardless of where it's coming from in the county, in the same sort of way, so that you can make the best decision.
Great, quick comment. You and I have talked about a number of issues since you've been here and known each other before that. Budget office, not a very accurate term for what you're doing. I like what you're doing, but budget office is very narrow. People think of that as just putting the budget together, grinding numbers. You're much more comprehensive in terms of planning, in terms of forecasting, in terms of decision-making. I don't know, just a thought. It just sounds like it's a very narrow term for a group doing a much broader array of.
I think you're exactly right. We just didn't have enough room on a placard to actually.
Genius Group doesn't do it.
So I just want to just maybe share a bit more on that. So the county has not had a budget office. We haven't had a budget manager. We've had senior analyst, financial analyst, and then there was the CFO that reported to the support services director, which reported to the assistant county administrator, which reported to me. So part of this redesign is to be elevating that financial function into a core function, a C-level suite position, and also that budget. You're right, Roy. It's probably understated for what that means, because as we move forward, it's not just the budget. Adapting the budget is one point in time, but this is really not only an annual process, it's financial forecasting, it's reporting on outcomes. So this will be an evolution. Steve joining the team is a huge pivotal point in that evolution, so that we ensure that we provide the board and the community the best financial information and planning that we can.
So can I ask a structural question along that lines? So you said, Greg, that historically the budget process has been buried deep somewhere in the finance department. Okay, and I would completely agree with that. Seems like, oh crap, it's January. We got to put everything aside here and we got to focus on the budget for the next 3 months. So I get that. So you're carving that responsibility out into a budget office, putting a person, Steve, overseeing that. Probably a couple questions there. Are we going to add more staff? What's that budget office look like staffing wide as we move ahead? And then is part of the purpose of that office to, as you said, to work with the departments, provide us with more levers, I think is what you called that. But so it would be kind of almost a year-round process of working with the departments and developing not only the projections for what it looks like, but how we can do things a little differently, maybe. So is that, it's kind of like, that's their whole focus year-round. Am I envisioning this correctly?
Yeah, I think so. And I'll just try to expand on that a little bit. So in terms of staffing, at this point, I don't see adding any additional staff. I've repurposed one position that I had in finance. We are going through a organizational assessment of the finance department. And I believe Rodney Rhodes who's doing the assessment, has meetings set up with you. And that's part of his conversation with each of the commissioners. Is that in terms of cyclical, ongoing budget financial review, not just during budget time, the answer is absolutely yes. So that's the decision support, the analytical support. When a proposal comes to the board and has a financial impact, we want to make sure we've had a chance to look at it. Because if there's a recommendation to approve it from staff, we want you to be able to look at us and we can say, yeah, we've looked at it and we agree, or we have some differences that we want to make sure you know about. So it's, again, just to get the best information, and it's ongoing all year round. So, yeah.
Well, 1.4 billion, kind of worth something there.
Worth looking at. Yeah. Yep. Thank you. Okay, so the next objective is essentially just a balanced financial plan moving forward. And so when the budget comes to you each year, that we'll have a mechanism to actually look at that forecast. And I'm talking right now specifically about the general fund, but it could apply to all funds in the county. But essentially as a forecast says, if we approve this budget today, what does it look like in 5 years? And so we have a general fund forecast tool here, and I'll just kind of explain it real quickly. This would be, it's 11 years and 5 years of history, 5 years of forecast, and 1 year of budget. Now, these numbers loosely resemble existing Washington County numbers, but they aren't 100% meaningful in terms of that. So I wouldn't draw any conclusions off the forecast as it moves out, but other than the fact that the elements that I'm sharing with you here are what's really important. So a couple of the lines that are in the graphics, you have your red line, which represents expense. You have a green line, which represents revenue. The dotted line is something you're probably familiar with from past budget, past reporting, and that's the percent of fund balance number, trying to keep it between that 15 and 20%. And then the blue line, which is important to talk about, is the fund balance. And is the budget that we're, in this case, using this as an example, is the budget we're approving have a solid forward-looking financial outcome or not? In this case, I've highlighted the assumptions in this example budget that revenue are growing at 5.5% and expenses are growing at 6.1%. Naturally, that's going to cause those two lines to diverge over time. And if nothing else is done, it will eventually erode fund balance. It's such a slight difference here that probably that difference could be written off to margin, but it's something to pay attention to. So this would be the look at the budget. This is where the general fund budget would be today. And if we project that out over the next 5 years, that's where we'd end up being in 5 years, if our crystal ball is perfect. Okay, so that leads to the next objective, which is a budget process that builds to a balanced long-term financial plan. The key words here are—
Greg, can I interrupt here? We've been going for 2 hours and we're behind schedule. So may I suggest maybe we break at this point in this presentation and take
What are we projecting in time today? I need to be
Probably till 4.
about
4. Can we
Can I ask one quick question first? Can you go back a slide? What we have talked about, what Tanya and I have talked about a lot is at what point in time we have to face the reality that the revenue stream is into the future not going to support the expenditures. So we're going like this. This is very, very, as you pointed out, 28 is just a little bitty thing. But does that mean we're on a bare bones budget to make that being little bitty? And what if we aspired to do a little bit better? What does that look like? And where would we do that at? And I think, to me, we don't get to live off of soup and bread for 5 years as a county and actually provide the level of services that are going to be placed upon us to maintain our status as the economic development of the state of Oregon. So to me, I'd much prefer to see, I like this, but then I want to have a reality check. What exactly does this mean and where could we do better?
So that's one of the main purposes of this tool as we move forward. It'll become, and I'll show you here in a little bit, but it becomes very dynamic. You can ask questions like, well, what happens if we increased our revenue by $1 million a year? What happens to those lines? What if we had an expenditure reduction? What happens there? What if we do a one-time expense versus an ongoing addition? All of those factors will play into this.
Okay.
I have one quick one too. Your forecasting, when I looked at it, that difference out there is probably about $9-10 million, right in that vicinity. But you've made assumptions, and I don't know the one behind me, so I can't really read them very well. But the about a 0.5% change, is that over the entire period? Because we know that inflation, if it's still clipping, it's 6, 7, 8%. We're not picking up 5.5, so your half a point spread is not even within the realm. So how did you come about your forecasting?
Honestly, it was just a couple of numbers to show it as an example.
So this isn't factual, this is just, okay.
Yeah.
Today is process. We're not doing financial forecast. What the questions help illustrate though is the board, some commissioners desire to come back and have an agenda item with financial forecasting. So Greg will talk about timing of that when we come back from break.
Perfect, because I just didn't know if that was, you were trying to really project, and I said, well, that's not probably gonna happen. Yeah.
No, that's
here's
right.
an
Yeah,
example.
the numbers are just hypothetical.
But also, we've seen forecasts where we have a crossover point between revenue and expenditures. This isn't the first time we've seen a future crossover point. And the explanation then is we take our current assumptions, it's generally been a 3-year forecast that out and then manage to that time frame. And then we revisit every year up to and through that 3 years and keep rolling it. So to your point, Ms. Angie, today is about the process. It's not actually a quarterly forecast for where we stand versus where we're headed. Okay, so Commissioner Fye, we're going to take is a 10-minute break okay?
Yeah.
10-minute break at this juncture and then return to work session at 10 minutes past 3.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair Herndon.
Yep. is joining us on the telephone. So we're picking back up on our work session topic of the budget process redesign. And we're picking back up with slide 14 of the presentation, I think. 13 or 4, wait. I wasn't
12.
sure if you, yeah, that one.
Yep.
That's where we left off, right?
Yes, slide 12.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So what we just talked about, the previous graphic, which was the general fund forecast, focused in on, what was a static budget looking forward? Well, we all know that our budgets don't stay static. Each year there's changes. And so this next objective here is a budget process that builds a balanced long-term financial plan. The key here is the word builds and balanced. So the activity under this graphic is to introduce the concept of a decision package. You may have heard them before as an ad package or a special request. These would be items that would come in addition to a base level budget, to a current service level budget. There's different terminology that would be decision points along the way to add expenses, potentially add revenue, potentially budget reductions. They look something like this. I have a few graphics.
And Greg, if I may add, the reason for this is we know that our budget delivers services to our community so that we are clear with those adds or reductions. What is that service impact or that service outcome with the decisions?
So this graphic that's before you now is the same graphics I showed you before, except there's a decision package built in that adds $3.5 million of new expense that grows annually at 1%. So you can see what happens to the red line. So the red line before, the difference between the red and the green line, we're pretty close. It adds some expense moving forward. So this is some of the process that will set up the system that will allow us to toggle through these decisions. So it'll help us make, what happens if we proceed with this project versus this one, or if we do these two and not that one. So this would add that new expense. This next graphic, you can see how it adds a one-time $10 million expense in FY24. So it simply elevates that red line in FY24 and then carries it on at the same growth rate. You can also see what happens to fund balance in FY28. It's gone from an FY21 number to probably 80 million down to a $20 million number in the out years.
So you're using, your assumptions are baseline revenue, 5.5, expenditures is 6.1. You're using the same expenditure percentage for each one of those. And I get where you're plugging in new expenses and one time, and I get that, but our expenditures aren't going to maintain a 6.1. I mean, inflation is going to. So isn't that, this is new stuff. The decision packages is the new stuff, isn't it?
That's right.
Okay, so why would we use expenditures at a flat line and not include inflation in there?
We wouldn't. This is just an example of the dynamics of the model. That's all it is.
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. Okay.
Process.
Okay.
And this doesn't include the capital projects.
No capital, just operating.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that'll change a lot.
Yep. So likewise, the next package there is a $2.5 million ongoing reduction if we made some budget cuts along the way. You can see that helps the fund balance in the out years a little bit. And I think we have one more here. And what happens if we found $2 million per year in new revenue? It moves the green line up. So you can see the point here is to demonstrate the dynamics of the model and how we can start building in some of these decisions as we move forward, so that the decisions we make today, we have a pretty good understanding of the impacts in the out years. Any questions on the modeling? Okay. The next objective is a collaborative approach to providing coordinated fiscal analysis and decision support. So how do we do that? So the budget office staff are assigned to both departments and the ACAs, and we'll work closely with them on their initiatives, their programs, their projects that they want to bring forward, so that we make sure we have that collaborative presentation of proposals to leadership and to the board. And also, this one we're working on right now, I'm working on it with Kevin, is to modify the agenda process so that there's a more robust fiscal analysis component to the staff reports, where if there's a financial impact, that the finance department, the budget office will be involved and will collaborate with the departments to make sure that the fiscal information that's provided has been double checked. Next objective is to provide informative, transparent, and useful financial information to the board, public, and staff, demonstrated by the picture of the glass piggy bank. Very transparent. And this is the activities underneath that would be to create a periodic fiscal report for the board. I got an example of that. There's one in the packet we'll talk about here in a second. And GFOA we'll create eventually a GFOA best practices budget document. And it'll be electronic versus printed. It'll be electronic that we can print instead of printed that we save electronically. So there'll be some interactivity with it as well. There's a GFOA report called the Popular Annual Financial Report, or PAFR. We'll produce one of those, and I have an example of that. And right now we're working on our web presence on the website. So both, what's the financial information that the public finds useful? Where do we place that on the website so that they can access it as best as possible?
And if I may add to that, that work will not be completed by the time the website is live September 26th. This will be work that will be evolving over the next 6 months.
As part of this next proposed fiscal year budget.
I think you have too many coins in the piggy.
Actually, I should have said this early on, that what I've been sharing here is a pretty ambitious plan. So we're going to complete some of those this year. We're going to start a lot of them this year, and a lot of them we're going to continue on into the future. But we've got a very full job jar, and it's a matter of picking out the right thing at the right time and just working on it. So here's an example of a fiscal report, and this is it has the key elements that we're actually working on this with ITS right now, but it's it provides some information. And this is just an example, actually, I took from Deschutes County, although I put the Washington County logo on it because I felt that would be more interesting. But it provides a look back to last year's budget and actuals in these different areas. This happens to be the Deschutes County General Fund. It provides a comparison of budget to actuals for this current year, where we're at during this year, how much revenue we brought in compared to budget, how much we spent compared to budget. But maybe the most important parts of this are as you slide to the right and you look at the projection column. The idea here is that the folks who are closest to understanding the different elements of the fiscal components of the budget would be able to go in and actually make updated projections and provide a variance analysis out on the right-hand side. So we can say, the budget, we felt we were going to end with an ending fund balance of, I'll just throw a number out, $10 million. Based on these revised projections, we think we're going to end at 13.1 million, and have that variance analysis occur during the course of the year. So we're always staying fresh with it.
And are the red letters notes to further describe those variances?
Yeah, if I had more room and it wasn't an eye chart, you would see the notes down below.
Yeah, okay.
And this is a slide out of a popular annual financial report. And so, we produce this annual comprehensive financial report every year. And this is a little bit of a beast and difficult for probably most people to read. So the purpose of the PAFR, the Popular Annual Financial Report, is to take the information out of the ACFR, the key portions of the ACFR, and publish those in a very easy to read, very understandable, maybe an 8 to 10 page document. So this is just an example of a question that comes up often, is where do your taxes go? And the dollars across the top there represent $1 worth of taxes. And so in this case, although the county operates as the tax collector and brings all of the taxes in, the county only retains a small piece of that. In this case, only 17 cents of that dollar is retained by the county for county services. And most of that, as you can see in this example, go to health and safety or public safety. The rest of the funds go elsewhere. Most of them end up going to the state school fund.
Here in Washington County, I believe almost 18 years ago, well, no, a little bit after that, with then Cornelius City Manager Dave Waffles. Cornelius was the first jurisdiction in Washington County to utilize the PAFR, to make that available, and other jurisdictions have followed since then.
It's a great communication device. It's one of many. Then this last objective here, I think is the last one, is just a list of budgeting best practices. And I'm not going to read through all of them. Again, this list is fairly ambitious. I've broken it out between what we think or what we'd like to have completed for this budget process, what we think we can start this budget process, and probably some items that would move into the future. But we'll just keep working at these as we move forward. But again, the goal is to, I think there was a graphic in the GFOA presentation talking about budget best practices. And so these are just items that have come out of there that we'll move towards. And I guess that wasn't the last one. I think this is the last one, a capital improvement plan. Over on the right-hand side is just a list of numbers from, it's not Washington counties, but down one hand, it's nothing more complex than down the left-hand side is the list of your infrastructure projects, either maintenance, major maintenance projects that are capitalized or capital expenditures that are needed to keep up with growth, for example. And then what's the plan to fund those? Do we fund those with internal savings, with ongoing pay-as-you-go funds, or new revenue sources, or perhaps even debt? So that's how it helps us plan. This is a similar tool to that general fund forecast. It helps us plan our capital. Moving forward.
So I've had on more than one occasion needed to define what capital is for our community members. So as we move forward, it may help us to have a definition of what is capital to help bring folks along, including whatever we have for our budget 101 of the year.
Also, another part of a capital improvement plan that can be helpful is highlighting unfunded needs. So such as if there's a master plan that's been adopted, but there hasn't been a funding strategy for the capital in the master plan, or known needs, and I'll just say courthouse, for example, that doesn't have a financial, at least there's a running list of what those larger items are so that they don't get lost in transitions of staff or even turnover with elected.
And we believe that we have a lot of this already at the department level. So part of the exercise is collecting it together and putting it together in one document. Rachel's and David are spending a fair amount of time in chartering this project to put the CIP together. So we're actually working on that process right now. So
I'm just glad I no longer have to carry the list in the board initiatives document.
I think this is my last plate, and this is not necessarily a budget objective, but I would say it's probably one of the most important life cycles that we will launch into once the strategic plan is completed. And what that is with vision, with strategies, with objectives, with resource allocation, with outcomes, are we able to meet those needs of our customers, our taxpayers, our citizens? And this is a circular reference, which I spoke about earlier, which cycles back and says, once we have our outcomes, are we on target? Do we need to tweak our strategic plan a little bit? And at some point, we're able to steer the boat in the proverbial ocean easier because we're not making major changes. We're just making tweaks to it. So this eventually is part of my hope that it'll come out of the tail end of the budget process, and we can start, measuring our productivity and what we're doing and our outcomes. That's it. Questions?
Could I kick us off with a higher level one? How does this process, and maybe this is something to come for further clarity throughout the remainder of this quarter, how is this process going to change our involvement in the budget process? I guess that's a question really for you, Ms. Angie.
So we are working on updating, I call it the swim lane graphic, which has the budget process graphic, which was created last year for your board and your community for transparency into our budget process. So the goal is to have that updated version to the board by before the town hall, because that will be a perfect time to also share community involvement within our budget process. So as far as immediate changes, you will at some point through this budget development process start to see the economic forecasting that Greg had lifted up, the financial reports, which he is working on the development of that, the ITS backbone with ITS. You will start to see what I will call a shell of a CIP this coming budget process. So you will see movement, and I took my slide deck down, but Greg had separated out kind of the immediate process steps and then what are the future. So I'm confident your board will see improvements. We are working within our existing FTE staffing levels. In addition, as Mr. Munn had indicated, we are in the process of conducting a finance department assessment. So after Mr. Rhodes completes that assessment, I think we'll have a better handle on what are the finance department needs, hearing from you, other key leaders within the county, and frankly, most importantly, the staff that are directly working in that department to help inform those assessment findings. I think the journey of budget and strategic planning, we will try to uncouple where we are in each of those processes, and yet they are going to be tied together as we move forward over this next year. Does that answer your question?
Helps, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, more to come.
More to come.
Commissioner Fye, before we start around the table here, did you have any questions on what Mr. Munn presented or any comments at this time?
No, thank you, Chair Harrington. I just wanted to say to make a quick comment, no question from my end, but Greg, sorry I'm not in the room for your presentation to the board, but great presentation. Having more dialogue.
Sorry, Commissioner Fye, you've completely cut out.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was just saying that I don't have a question, Chair Harrington, but I did have a comment for Greg. And that was just to say, Greg, sorry, I'm not in the room for your first presentation to the board, but great presentation and look forward to having more dialogue about the budget.
Thank you.
All right, around the room, commissioners, any questions or comments on anything you've seen?
I don't want to spend a lot of time, somebody would do it one-on-one, but are you going to, is this the beginning of maybe separating some of the key, you mentioned public safety groups into something out of the general fund, so disaggregate the general fund, so it just looks like this. I don't want to use the word slush because that's always a terrible way, but everything slushes through there. It's really not very transparent as to what the cost of doing business is. So is this part of that process?
Yeah, so one of the key components of making the general fund more transparent is to remove those operations that aren't necessarily truly should be in the general fund. For example, internal service operations.
Right.
Those really should stand outside the general fund and be funded independently to help make the general fund more transparent. We'll also look at other operations when in the general fund that are partially funded by the general fund, but maybe only a small component and might make more sense to reside as a special revenue fund. So that the component of the general fund expenditure for that department is represented in a transfer, and it's one number that you can see. You know what I'm talking about, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Other comments, commissioners?
Well, when you meet with him, I'll tag team along with that, so you don't have to be redundant about that. And then we can always speak in accounting ease there. But this, this schedule that you put on slide 20, which is the one that you stole from Deschutes, I like that because I've always liked budget to actual comparatives. So when would we have that information for the fiscal year that we just closed, June 30, 22?
So I am scheduled in October to bring the first financial report to the board, assuming it's going to be ready. I don't think it'll be in that final format. I think we're gonna, if we can get to a budget to actual report to start and then work ourselves into the projection and the variance analysis, I think we'll do that over the next X number of months. But my goal is to get as soon as possible.
Okay.
So.
Well, I realize we're dependent on our auditors for that
Right.
information. And so I didn't know what our timeline to have that. I mean, October would be really fast,
Yeah.
quite frankly, for an organization this size to have an audit
Yeah.
finished up, but yeah, and I don't.
Well, even to bring, so for October to bring August financials.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I just want to say that I appreciate the rigor and the design elements here. It really, it will help me as I go through this process to understand and to anticipate and to grasp. But if it's helping me, it's helping all of our residents in this community. And that's, to me, that's what's most important. So thank you for the work here. I know it's a big change. It's a sea change for the county, but it is something that is absolutely necessary, especially when we look to the future and what our, what the critical nature is of our future. So thank you. Thank you.
So Commissioner Treese, if I can just jump in, Chair. So I think of a chart of accounts or how we establish funds as design. I am not a CPA or a finance, so I think of it from a design and open and transparency. It's kind of how you're setting and stage the intent of a fund for a specific use. And that's open and transparent government at its core. And so that's part of what Greg is talking about of looking at the funds. And I would say that's an important conversation and information for all of the board members because what is a special fund really needs to be looked at as various state funds have changed over time and our special funds are not operating truly as a special fund has operated in the past. So we do need to do some analysis and the cleanup, and that's going to be a really important conversation for the full board to have.
Well, I think it will be helpful. Board, we know that we have the town hall on Wednesday, September 28th, in addition to the AOC District 8 meeting that day. We have a Board of Commissioners Town Hall where we will be doubling back as an organization to our community to follow up on, we had our prior March town hall for input and to help our community understand where we were headed as a county financially. I think it was March 8th. And then we went through the budget process where the community had more input opportunities this past year. And we said in March that we would come back to them with how we ended up for fiscal year 23 with an adopted budget. So I think it will be helpful to remind our community members what we tried to do differently and what we think that has told us and how we see modifying or continuing that into the next fiscal year. And then in addition to that, based on the prior year, having done something different, what do we hope to do differently that they will see, right? To help explain why they're going to see some changes and give them a flavor for what kind of changes we may be going through that that we're going to be adjusting through over the next proposed budget year, because we're all in this together. And when we met with our government relations team recently, I mentioned to them one thing I'm far more sensitive to is state mandates, particularly those that don't come with enough cost coverage. So I know I'm on the lookout for that too. So onward, ho, we'll go together. Commissioner Fye, any last comments or questions based upon board discussion you've had the opportunity to hear?
No, thank you.
Okay, just checking in.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Mr. Munn. Onward, ho, we go together.
Thank you.
Okay, and our last topic for today is the Clean Water Services Advisory Committee recruitment update. We have Karen DeBaker.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to elevate Karen DeBaker to talk about the Clean Water Advisory Commission recruitment. She is our Public Affairs Manager. Karen? Oh, right there. Right there.
I'm nice and huge.
You can't see us at the same level that we can see you, but thank you so much for joining us, Karen.
Thank you. Good to be here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, good afternoon, Chair Harrington and members of the board. So today we're asking you to review applications received for 6 positions on the 13-member Clean Water Services Advisory Commission. And on September 27th, we're scheduled to bring back those proposed appointments. So as a reminder, each member serves a 4-year term, and those terms are staggered, so we don't have all 13 expiring at the same time. So approximately a quarter of the CWAC terms expire each year. So on June 21st, the board directed staff to either begin or continue recruitment for the 6 positions. And those include Builder Developer 1, Business 2 Representative, Environment 2 Representative, District 4, District 2, and then the at-large representative. So what we received is we received 5 applications for District 2, 2 applications for Builder Developer, 1 for Business 2, and 1 for Environment 1. So we did not receive applications for the at-large position, but any applicant can serve in that position. And Shannon Huggins from our community engagement team, along with Mark Jockers, did interview everyone, and all are willing and able to serve in that at-large position if you tell us or they are interested to do so. So we did not receive any for District 4 as well. However, we have a possible late candidate that will be applying in the next week or so. But we will keep these and can keep these positions opened until filled.
I'm a little confused. If I look at your chart, we have also the District 4 position opening up, but did I miss you say that?
Didn't get
Oh,
applications,
okay.
except now we have one.
Okay,
Maybe.
thank you.
So we can keep any of these open until filled, and we can provide you, and your packet has all of the applicants in there and a little bit of background. And certainly, if any of you are interested in doing the interviews, we could provide all that information to you. So any questions?
Did you want us to give you, Commissioner Treese's watch is talking to us. Did you want us to give you feedback on selecting someone, or does the Commissioner for District 2 have any feedback on what you might be considering to advance a recommendation out of the 5 folks who have applied from District 2?
Right, we would like you to review, and we do have, if we were gonna recommend, I mean, Ramesh from District 2 was a great candidate, and Mark Farrar for the Builder Developer 1 position is a great candidate. That's whom we recommend, but we would love your thoughts and your recommendations as well.
As District 2 Commissioner, I'm in support of Ramesh, so thank you. And I also did, I talked to Mark Farr about applying for this as well, and I think he'd be a great candidate.
So for the business category, is there any feedback other than there's a person who applied?
And Stu was a great candidate, and Elaine as well.
That's the environmental position.
Elaine too, or Elaine Stewart for environment too.
How about for the business position?
And the business position, let's see, we had, yeah, business 2 is Stu. And Stu, I can give you a little bit of background on Stu. Yeah, broker and partner at McAdam Forbes Commercial Real Estate Services. So current member of CWAC, appointed in 2018, involved with Providence Children's Hospital, Westside Business Alliance, obviously the 12th and 2040, Wilsonville UGB study, Wilsonville urban renewal, and strategic planning for the city of Sherwood.
Okay, so Stu Peterson has reapplied for reappointment then, is how I should understand that. Okay. Sorry, I just can't quite make heads or tails from the whole presentation of information. Okay. I may be the last one to catch up here compared to everybody else.
And in your packet, you'll see the listing of when folks were appointed, how long their terms currently are, and those that are expiring.
Okay. So I'll just say from my standpoint, as I read the packet previously, I didn't quite note that you had a recommendation, Commissioner Treese, for the District 2 appointment. So I'm glad to hear that. And for the at-large position, I'm perfectly happy to do some due diligence in terms of getting familiar with the other applicants to see if they might be appropriate for serving in the at-large position. But I won't be able to get to that until my return. So if I understand it, we've heard, I heard your comments. Maybe I should back up in terms of these categories. So we have a District 2 position, and out of this slate, Commission District 2 Commissioner is comfortable with seeing Ramesh move forward.
And I just might add that I've had a conversation with Mark Jockers ahead of this, so that's partly why I'm a little bit further down the road probably.
Then if I keep walking through the categories for Builder Developer 1, or Builder Developer 2, we heard Commissioner Treese's comments on Mark Farrar. I'm familiar with both of these individuals. Drake Butch, he's also served, as it says here, on the Metro Bond Oversight Committee for Parks and Natural Areas. I have experience with him on that, as well as with Urban and Rural Reserves, and he is an active committee member as well. So Mr. Farrar has, as far as I know, been an active participant on the ROMAC committee as well. So for ROMAC, does he live in the rural part of District 3?
Yes.
Be a good applicant.
The other reason that I think he would be a good applicant is that he served on the other side of the table, so to speak, for years on the East Coast as a city manager. So there's just that balance, which I think is an unusual balance that he brings. I do not know Drake, so I'm just giving my perception about Mark.
Drake is also excellent. He used to be with the Home Builders Association once upon a time.
Yeah.
It's been a while ago.
Two strong candidates.
He's a strong candidate. He could be a good at large.
Well, and also for, I mean, his experience and Mr. Peterson's experience, they're both business experience. So they both fit for that category as well, in my opinion. So, but I understand that Mr. Peterson, he was first appointed in 2016. Okay, that's something to think about too. So,
I don't
okay.
just have a pick in that area, but he's excellent. He's been involved every organization around. He really has the ear of a lot of people and is trusted. So he's very good.
Do we know does he live in the district?
We do not know. He didn't provide any demographic information.
Who is that?
Mr. Peterson, Stuart Peterson? Could we find out? Okay. Okay. Well, I know for the at-large position, I'll take a look at the remainder as well, but it looks, and for the environmental position that's opened with Lori Hennings having served for a long time. Elaine Stewart, I know her as well from her work at Metro and learned a lot from her. One of the multiple projects that she managed and took me for tours on is, I can't remember the name of the property, but it's the whole wetlands on the side. When you come down, there's Fern Hill Road and Blooming Fern Hill Road. Just, I can't figure out if that's north or what, from the JWC plant. Then there's the BLM or the federal facility. And there's a whole wetland in there that's been re-engineered. That, and then the prairie lands to the south that were redone twice, as well as over on the upper side of the hill. She's managed properties up there. So she's very familiar with the Tualatin River floodplain. And so I think she would be really good on CWAC as well.
So she was also referred by Lori Hennings. So on her application.
Great, great. So I think that's a good one as well, for us to move on sooner rather than later. So I think I'm just trying to summarize here at a minimum. I haven't heard any discomfort with moving forward with Ramesh for the District 2 seat, Mark Farrar for the builder developer position, Stuart Peterson to reappoint for the business position, and Elaine Stewart as the environmental position, then just leaving open the District 4 and the at-large seat for the time being.
Okay.
Chair Harrington, did you want to think some more on the at-large and talk with, Mark Jockers is gone this month, Karen Baker, or how did you want to handle that? You said you had.
I'll come back to it once I'm back from the World Water Conference.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And we can provide all of the contact information as well if you'd like to do interviews, so.
And Commissioner Willie will have to speak for himself.
Yeah, I've already been talking to Karen about once we get the application and then sitting in on the interview, interested person. And we'll be doing that in, I don't know, a couple of weeks.
Mhm.
What I heard you say. Yeah.
Yeah, once he submits. We'll keep you posted.
All righty, so we have some we can move forward with sooner rather than later.
Thank you. That's very helpful feedback.
Commissioner Fye, did you have any questions or comments?
No, thank you, Chair Harrington, just listening.
Okay, thank you. I think that brings us to the end of today's work session agenda. Were there any last items, commissioners or leadership?
I do have one scheduling item I failed to raise this morning. We do have a scheduling conflict for the November 3rd roundtable. So staff will be working with your staff assistants to find an appropriate rescheduling date for that roundtable.
All righty. Well, without further ado then, we'll adjourn to the work session of today, Tuesday, September 6th. Take care.